Okay, fourth period math students, a quick recap of what we talked about today when we talked about the family with their jobs, family of the future. First of all, we had George. We talked about George, and he had a job that made $20 an hour. So we figured, well, 20 bucks an hour. I ask you if he doesn't work any hours at all, how much money would he make? And that's a pretty easy number. He would make zero. So if he worked nothing, no hours at all, George would make 0 hours. And we could put that on a graph. 0 and 0. Okay, the dot is already there. So money is on the x-axis or the y-axis, and the amount of hours worked is on the x-axis. What if George works for, I don't know, 3 hours? Well, if he makes $20 an hour, 20 times 3, that would be $60. So we could put a point at 3 and 60. And these 2 points right here make a line, and we can and so that way we can figure out how much money George makes for however many hours he works. We don't need to figure it out each time. I could put this line just like that. And that makes perfect sense. If he works for 0 hours, he makes nothing. If he works for 3 hours, he gets 60. If he worked for 4, he'd get 80, and on and on and on. There are an infinite number of hours he can work. We just put these 2 points on this line. So there's George's line that shows how much he makes for how long he works. His wife, Jane, has a better job. She makes $40 an hour. And so we asked, I said, well, what if Jane worked for 1 hour? How much money would she make? And we all knew that answer. It was 40 bucks. So for 1 hour, we can put that on the graph. If she works for 1 hour, she can make $40. Okay? Also, if she makes $0 or works 0 hours, she would make $0. I asked you then also, what if Jane worked for 2 hours? Well, if she worked for 2 hours, she would make $80. She would make $80. Now that I have my 2 points, I can put a line on there for Jane. And I can figure out whenever I want to see how many hours she works, I can figure out how much money Jane makes. So I put Jane's line right up there, and it pretty much matches up with those lines pretty close. So the question we asked again is George ever going to make more money than Jane? Which line is steeper? Who makes more money? Jane makes more money. Her line is steeper, and that's kind of where slope comes in. Now, will George ever make more money than Jane? Only if he works a lot more hours. If Jane only worked 1 hour and George works longer, maybe he'd make more. But if they work the same amount of hours, Jane will always make more money because her line is steeper. She makes more money per hour. And then we throw in at the end, I think we threw this in if we had time, we throw in their daughter, Judy. She makes $20 an hour, but she gets $10 bonus. For every day she shows up, she gets a $10 bonus. So if Judy were to work for 3 hours, how much money would she make? Well, see, 3 hours, $3 at $20 an hour, 3 times 20 is 60, but she gets that $10 bonus. So at 3 hours, Jane is going to make $70. So I can put this point, I can plot her hours. For 1 hour, she makes $70. I'm sorry, 3 hours, Jane will make $70. I could put her point right there. $20 an hour plus 10. What if Jane worked for 4 hours? How much money would she make? Well, 4 hours times $20 an hour is 80. You add the same 10, she'd make 90 bucks an hour. So I can add another point at 4 and 90 for Jane. And there's Jane's other line right there. And now I can put a line on there for Jane, and look at this line. This is a great line because you're going to see something really cool. There's Jane's line right there. So I put her line there. She starts at 10. So instead of starting at 0, Jane starts at, she doesn't work at all. She gets a $10 just for showing up without working any hours. So there's Jane's line. And if you look at this, we noticed this today, there's something cool about Jane's line. Jane's line and George's line, they're the same slant. They have the same slope, we call it, because they both make $20 for every hour they work. George will never, if they work the same amount of hours, George will never catch up to Jane. because their rate of change or the amount of money they make per hour is the same. So that's why we're talking about slope today. It's just a way to measure the steepness. It's also a way to measure the rate that, in this case, you make on every hour you work, how much you make per hour. Jane makes the most money, $40 per hour. Her line is the steepest. Judy and George make the same amount per hour, so their lines are the same steepness, but Jane gets kind of a little bit of a head start, and she's just a little bit higher on the money factor than George. So that's how we kind of introduce ourselves to slope, and how we want. It's really important and useful to know how much what the rate of change or the slope of lines are. That's your quick recap of what we did today.